Good evening. I'd like to call to order the July 23rd, 2019 special meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have a quorum of 7 members. If you're going to speak tonight, it would be best to sign in now on the sign-up sheet. The sign-up sheet is still at the lectern. If you do come up, if you could please be sure to announce yourself and make sure you signed in. So our procedure tonight will be, we've got 2 matters. We'll first go over the Maple and Main Street city improvements. For each application, we'll let the applicant make a presentation of their application, and then the members of the commission can ask questions of the applicant, and we'll then let the general public have an opportunity to speak, anyone who would like to, who has signed in. And then we'll ask we'll have the opportunity for discussion among the commission members in the room. So the first order of new business is Maple Avenue and Main Street, City of Evanston applicant.
Members of the Commission, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the City Engineer for Evanston. And I'm here tonight to discuss a project that we have just in the planning phase. We are looking at doing a major streetscape improvement on Main Street from Maple Avenue to Hinman. Here is a very high-level shot where this is Maple, and down at the other end is Hinman. We see Chicago Avenue, and the train tracks are in this area. And this goes through the Main Street Business District. It's also bordered by Park School and Albany Care, as well as a couple other major commercial areas and multifamily housing. We're looking at a very holistic project where we're essentially going from edge of building to edge of building and fixing everything in between. This project's being largely driven by the pedestrian safety issues that are occurring in that area. So we're looking at doing things like changing the sidewalk from being paver block to our city standard in business districts, which is a concrete sidewalk with paver block ribbon. We will be addressing all the ADA issues. The sidewalks are not at the proper cross slope in a number of the areas, so we're going to be adjusting sidewalk grades. We're going to be putting in new ADA ramps at the intersections. We are making accommodations for bicycles. We are not planning on putting in bike lanes because the street width is only so wide, and in order to make the necessary pedestrian improvements, we and preserve parking, which is an issue for the business district. We find ourselves in a situation where we really don't have the ability to put in bike lanes that are dedicated, but we wish to make sure that it becomes a more bike-friendly area to bicycle with various signage and bike parking implementation. We're replacing and upgrading traffic signals. There are 3 traffic signals in the corridor, 4 traffic signals in the corridor, 3. And those will be upgraded. There are some of our older signals. We'll be putting in pedestrian countdown signals and adjustments such as that. Landscaping, we're going to be looking at the tree pits and the trees themselves and working towards a healthier tree environment, but also making sure that we're locating such things such that they're not impeding the pedestrians as much as they currently do. And the lighting in this area will be upgraded to the city standard. Right in the heart of the business district, that includes switching from what looked kind of like candy cane, upside down candy canes with globes on the end, to moving towards our city standard of Davit lighting. But in the area that is more towards the historic district on the west end, that is going to be our Talmadge light fixtures. This is the interesting part. This is the historic district. We see Gray Park right here, and this is, green line is the historic district. And you can see where our improvements are. Right outside, adjacent to the historic district. This project we're going to be seeking grant funding for that is administered through the Illinois Department of Transportation. So we're doing a fairly robust phase 1 planning process. And part of that is because we are adjacent to a historic district, there needs to be a way to receive comments if there's any issues or concerns about these improvements going in. Right adjacent to the historic district, the major improvements that you see is these are actually bicycle pictures denoting that bicycles are welcome in the same lanes as cars. This is a standard that Chicago has been using a lot to try to make it clear that cars and bicycles have to share the road in certain areas. We're looking at a little bit of sidewalk widening that may occur, but not a tremendous amount of work in this area. There will be some lighting upgrades. However, we did want to make sure that the Preservation Commission had the opportunity to express any concerns or make any comments that they wanted to about the project before we had submitted any planning reports to the Illinois Department of Transportation. So there is more information in the packet. I'm cognizant of the fact that you have a really busy agenda, and so I'm happy to just answer any questions you might have. If you'd like to ask about anything specifically, I can bring that up and we can go through it.
Questions, Sally?
Yes, my question concerns the park on the west side of Maple.
Yes,
Is anything happening there?
not on this project, no. That is a park that, in general, the city has begun to have a really discussion like, boy, we should put that into our planning horizon because the park needs an update and a refresher, but it's several years out still and it's not included as part of this project.
So just to clarify, no part of the improvements would be in the historic district?
They would not.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Do we need to see any other information? I think the packet had a lot of pictures. All right, well, why don't you take a seat? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the public that's here to speak to this project? No? All right. Any discussion by members of the commission? Okay, so our responsibility on this is solely to give kind of an advisory approval of the project. In this case, it's not even really in the district, but would anybody like to make a motion to give the advisory approval?
Sure, I move that we indicate our advisory approval to the proposed reconstruction of Main Street, starting at the very east edge of the Ridge Historic District. Standards for alteration 1 through 10 apply.
Second, from Sally. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All were in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our second project is 1215 Church Street, certificate of appropriateness for demolition of part of the existing YMCA complex and construction of a new facility to the extent within the district. Who will be presenting for the applicant? YWCA, I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Steve Bauer. I'm an attorney here on behalf of the applicant, the YWCA.
I'm not sure if the microphone is.
Is better?
Yes, it's better.
So again, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As I said, my name is Steve Bauer. I'm an attorney with Melzer, Bertel & Snell, here this evening on behalf of the YWCA of Evanston North Shore as the beneficial owner and operator of the YWCA campus, which, as you can see, is depicted on the overhead screen here with the red boundary. The property is located at 1215 Church Street, which is the southernmost majority of the campus property, and 1726 through 1730, which is the two sort of rectangular shaped properties on the far northern portion of the property. As you may know, the YWCA has a deeply rooted history in the city of Evanston, which dates back nearly 90 years and approximately 50 years at this specific location. We are both very excited and appreciative for the opportunity to appear before you this evening, especially given the fact that it is a special meeting. And I'm joined this evening by a number of YWCA representatives, which include Karen Singer as the president and CEO to my immediate left, Cindy Rawlings to her left as the board chair of the YWCA and president of the Evanston Community Bank and Trust. And then in the green shirt to my left is Jim Castenholtz of the AT Group as the owner's rep for the YWCA, which an owner's rep, if you're not familiar, oversees or handles the management and design and construction process. And then to Jim's left is Jack Schroeder of Land and Bone Baker Architects as the project architect. As you, I think, are well aware from the agenda, there are a number of requests that are before you this evening, some of which binding, for which the commission is a final decision-making authority, others of which non-binding relative to the commission's recommending authority for plan development, special use requests. As to the certificate of appropriateness requests, the first is a certificate of appropriateness regarding the proposed demolition of the formerly single-family structure on the southern portion of the property, which is the existing domestic violence center. And then secondly, the certificate of appropriateness for construction of a proposed two-story entryway and then related second-story walkway addition that would provide pedestrian connectivity between the southern portion of the property, which is proposed to have a reconfigured parking lot, partially in place of the existing domestic violence center, and then a new domestic violence center that would be located on the northernmost portion of the property, entirely outside of the Ridge Historic District. As I kind of alluded to, the requests that are being made for certificate of appropriateness are being made specifically in the context of a planned development request for redevelopment of the YWCA campus, which again generally entails demolition of the existing domestic violence center, construction of a new domestic.
Family Support Center.
Thank you very much. Family Support Center, which includes domestic violence residences, reconfiguration of the existing parking field, generally located on the southern portion of the property, construction of a new parking field that would be located on the northernmost boundary of the property, immediately north of the new community center, and then associated engineering and landscape related improvements. And I'm sorry, I neglected to mention, as I did earlier, the proposed two-story addition that would be constructed on the south side of the what is commonly referred to as modern 1970 existing administration and pool building. And I'll show you an image of that if I can find it to give you a better understanding. By the way, before I get too far away from this, I just want to explain something briefly for those of you who have perhaps recently reviewed the city's historic district maps. So this exhibit depicts with the green line I was going to use this pointer, but apparently it doesn't work. With the green line that kind of runs northwest, southeast, dashed green line depicts what the city's GIS map reflects as being the Ridge Historic District boundary. So it runs again on that sort of diagonal pattern, in this case southeast to northwest, to that red line that then proceeds north, jogs slightly to the east, and then continues north. Coming back the opposite way, again diagonally across the property from northwest to southeast, you'll see that it's shown as extending to Ridge Avenue. That is generally accurate with one very significant exception, and that is the orange line, which is shown directly south of that green line that I just described, running through the property, is actually what is described in the city's legal description for the Ridge Historic District back when it was established. So I'm just bringing this to your attention because it's obviously in conflict with what is currently on record with the city, but we've had communications with staff, and so I think there's a clear understanding that orange line running through the property is actually where the relevant district boundary lines. And so what I want to say with respect to that is you'll see that that boundary line is shown as basically wrapping around the northern portion of an existing building. That existing building is the existing domestic violence shelter, which is proposed to be demolished, and which is one of the certificate of appropriateness requests before you this evening. The other, and I'll get to a slide here that can hopefully help you understand that better as well, is related to construction partially within the Ridge Historic District, partially within the footprint of that building, the remainder of which extending northward and outside of the district. Am I correct in my understanding that you all have a tablet or electronic means of being able to view this presentation? Because I'm working off of exactly what was posted publicly, so as not to introduce any additional information, with one exception, which I'll describe later. But as a consequence of that, I don't have intimate knowledge of the sequence of some of these exhibits. So if you can bear with me a second. Needless to say, these are building elevations of what's proposed, and we can discuss these to whatever extent you would like. But again, trying to get back to where I intended. Okay, so this is a rendering of what is proposed to be constructed following the proposed demolition of the existing domestic violence center. If I could use the laser pointer, I would, and I would explain that what you see sort of in the foreground is the existing pool and administration building. There are some proposed facade enhancements, as well as the screen roof that you can see that would be added as part of the overall campus redevelopment. But the construction-related component that I referenced earlier is the, I'll call it appendage or portion of the structure that's immediately to the west, sort of behind that pool building that I referenced with the sloped roof. And again, this is partially within the footprint of the existing domestic violence center, which is directly connected to the southern facade of the existing pool and administration building. So part of the footprint of the existing domestic violence center would be consumed by way of this new building addition, the balance of which would be consumed by way of parking lot reconfiguration, which, as we can explain in greater detail later in the presentation, is important not only for general traffic circulation on the site, but also because of a known shortfall in available parking supply on the site, given a regular parking demand. And just to complete the renderings, I'll mention this is the proposed domestic violence and community center proposed on the northern portion of the campus. Again, wholly outside of the Ridge Historic District, but I want to make sure you understand exactly where this is proposed and how it relates to the overall campus redevelopment. And again, to give context, the building that you see, the one-story building that you see with a pitched roof and then the background is the same building as what you see in the foreground here with the green roof on it, just the opposite end of it. Mr. Chairman, I think at this time, I'd ask your leave to call Karen Singer to the podium to afford her an opportunity to address you and provide a little background and context as to the YWCA's presence at the site, as well as the needs driving the proposed certificates of this. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Karen Singer, as Steve says, and I have been proud to be the CEO at the YWCA Evanston North Shore for 15 years. I thought it might be helpful to just say a few words about what has brought us to this moment in time, which is a pretty monumental moment given our long history in Evanston. We started in 1931. And we started in a small basement office in the United Methodist Church on Hinman, and a group of women started programs for girls and young women coming into the community at the time. And it was really clear that the needs for programs and support quickly outpaced the ability to provide that in the little one-room office in the church. So we moved to Sherman Avenue in a storefront, kept growing programs, the needs kept growing, and then we purchased 3 houses on Maple Avenue and remained there for years, providing safety and support for girls and young women coming into the community looking for safe and stable housing and support. We soon outgrew that facility, and our board of directors found the piece of property at Church and Ridge where we're now housed, and found the old house, which was operating as a nursing home, and decided that it would be ideal for housing for low-income women, again, coming in looking for work to Evanston, and built out the rest of the facility into an aquatic center and program space for girls and women. We have been there ever since, and over the years have served thousands and thousands of women, girls, and families. The house was converted to a domestic violence shelter in the 80s, and again, excuse me, has kept thousands of women and children safe since that time. So in the last decade, we have experienced exponential growth. Our budget has grown 113%. Our staff has grown 70%. We have initiated or expanded 14 different program areas, all serving the general welfare and well-being of women, children, and families. And our physical footprint has stayed the exact same as it was 50 years ago when we moved in. And we simply cannot accommodate all the work that we are doing in our community. And in order to keep meeting those needs, we really must do more. And so that is what has precipitated this campus redevelopment and redesign and renovation. The house, while it has kept women and children safe, is not well suited to being a healing, trauma-informed space. We turn away over 1,000 women and children every single year, so it is clear that the need far exceeds our ability to respond. I share with you that over the last 5 years, some of you may know we purchased a building in South Evanston to provide longer-term housing for women and children, and seeing what we were able to do with a facility that respected the dignity of the women and children we served, it became clear to us that we could no longer stay in that house and do the best for the women and children we serve. So over the last 3 years, we've been on this journey to figure out how to do this. We looked long and hard at whether it was wise to stay in Evanston, or whether we should sell the whole thing and go elsewhere. And I think there were so many reasons that compelled us to stay in this community, not the least of which is our really 90-year history of serving the needs of this community. And so for that reason, in addition to some other cost-benefit analysis, economic reasons, we decided to stay put and continue to be an anchor community service in this city. So I just wanted to share that with you. It was, I think, provides some historical context of not only our work, but really the long, hard, and thoughtful nature of what we are trying to do in our community. So, thank you.
As Karen indicated, the YWCA's consideration of the project that is before you, inclusive of the proposed demolition of the existing domestic violence center, as well as the proposed construction of the new entry lobby walkway addition that you can see depicted here, has been the subject of significant thought and consideration, both with respect to the appropriateness of the site that has served as the YWCA's home for 50 years, as well as the appropriateness of what types of modifications are appropriate in the context of the neighborhood. As you can imagine, the request that's before you, the undertaking that's contemplated to redevelop the site, inclusive again of the types of things that are being sought for certificates of appropriateness, is a significant undertaking, both with respect to time and expense. There are significant programming-related challenges associated with that, given the YWCA's mission and the persons it serves. But again, as Karen said, the YWCA has come to the realization that, especially over the past few years, but over a much further extended period of time than that, with respect to overall evaluation, that the time is now for the YWCA to take further action to ensure that it can continue to serve its mission and individuals that are assisted through that mission for the overall benefit of the Evanston community. There's one exhibit I want to add that I kind of generally alluded to earlier, which is not included in your packet, but with your leave, Mr. Chairman, I'll distribute it and I'll explain why I think it's relevant before I proceed.
Bring it up.
And to be clear, this group exhibit, which consists of 4 sheets, is additional with respect to what was previously submitted for the filing deadline associated with our opportunity to appear before you this evening. However, it was, I understand it was provided by staff earlier today. This, as you can probably tell, is a photo montage that represents existing and proposed site conditions. The first 3 pages depict site conditions in the neighborhood surrounding the YWCA campus as they exist today. The 4th page depicts that same standard existing conditions, as well as the proposed new street conditions, again in neighborhood context, based on the proposed redevelopment request that's before you at this time. Again, you can see that there is a significant distance between the proposed domestic violence and community center and the proposed new entry on the south facade of the existing pool and administration building. And also considerably, there is a significant expanse between this site and adjacent properties, given this site's overall configuration and the improvements on adjacent sites. You can see that, for example, if you were to review sheet 4, specifically looking at photos 5, 6, and 7, you see that between the northernmost expansion of the campus and the nearest building to the north, there's a significant distance. Same is true for the property to the immediate south, which is in the historic district, but is across Church Street. Those types of things, as I'll explain in further detail, are, in our opinion, quite relevant to the context in which the YWCA campus exists today and the character of the historic district in relation to the YWCA campus. On the topic of the Ridge Historic District, I think it's quite relevant to note, and I wish the packet that was distributed for the meeting included this. You know, there's a significant gap in the Ridge Historic District boundary on the west side of Ridge between, say, Emerson and Grove, by comparison to, for example, between Grove and Greenleaf. What I mean by that is, between Grove and Greenleaf, the historic district spans significantly on both the east and west sides of Ridge. That's not true for this portion of the Ridge Historic District, north of Grove, and in particular north of Church Street, where you have only a small few properties that are within the Ridge Historic District, and large portions that are on the same side of the street as the YWCA campus that are not within the historic district, such as, for example, the Royce Moore School or the Northwestern University Police Building. Those buildings I mentioned in particular because they are quite sizable in nature, very comparable, in my opinion, to the YWCA campus as it is now configured and proposed to be redeveloped, and ultimately have the same ability to impact or form the character of the neighborhood in which this portion of the Ridge Historic District is located. If you had an opportunity to review the packet for this request, I don't need to tell you that it's quite voluminous, and for that reason I don't want to drag you through all the relevant responses provided for the certificates of appropriateness relative to demolition and construction. I do, however, feel that it's appropriate to hit the general highlights, unless, Mr. Chairman, you would rather that I not this time.
I mean, our primary mission is to view the application in light of the standards, particularly the standards for demolition in this case.
Sure.
And so I think that the main criteria we're going to apply is those standards, and so I do think you need to address those as a basic part of the application.
Absolutely. So, by the way, if it's helpful to you, I'm going to start on what I guess will be page 24 of the 290-page packet. So the first standard is whether the property or structure, and I'm just paraphrasing, of course, is of such historic, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance that its demolition would be detrimental to the public interest and general welfare. There are a number of things that I can say about this, but I think perhaps the most telling is that even the city's own historic nomination inventory specifically references the fact that, and this is a quote, after several remodelings, the existing domestic violence shelter building, that's an editorial, of course, gives little indication of what it once was. And I say that because that's quite relevant to the fact that although this is an older building located within the Ridge Historic District, even the city's own resources have identified the fact that there have been significant modifications to the building to not give an indication as to what it was. And those modifications include things like the screened porch, handicap ramp, the connection, which was quite material, of the former single-family residence to the administration and pool building 50 years ago, or nearly 50 years ago in 1970. And then the front facade modifications that occurred to that building as a consequence of the effort to attach it to the now constructed pool and administration building.
If you could just go to more basics. I mean, I read the packet multiple times looking for what is the current structure, when was it built? I mean, there's materials from back in, over like 150 years ago, that it seems like there's nothing about what is the current structure, what does it consist of, you say there were modifications, but to what? I mean, I think our main job, in most of the standards is, what we have to first decide is what is the historic structure and is it worth preserving? And I didn't see anything in the packet at all after repeatedly looking to see even what is the structure, when was it built, what are the pieces of it? It looks like there's probably perhaps constructed more than one time, and then what modifications were made to it and when that might have affected the historic integrity.
Sure, bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to pull up the city's inventory. So this, by the way, or at least the pages that I'm going to reference, are included in your packet. But again, in the interest of time, and out of respect for the process, I'm going to reference the relevant pages of the inventory. To answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at what is page 24 of this inventory, which again I know is included somewhere in this 290-page packet. It identifies the site as having been the Robert Hill House between 1884 and 1885. My presumption, of course, as a result, is that the building was constructed at some point prior to 1884, or no later than 1884. But what is quite relevant is that the house or houses that are referenced in this description of the site, which again are specific to 1215 Church Street, no longer exist and actually were removed from the property quite some time ago. The existing house appears from the inventory description, which I've read multiple times, but cannot state with certainty, again, appears to have been constructed between 1884 and 1885. That, however, is the same paragraph in which the language that I quoted before is contained, which reads, again, after several remodelings, the house gives little indication of what it once was, et cetera, et cetera. The history of the structure, as we understand it, and also reflecting back on the information which was minimal we were able to obtain from the Evanston History Center, is that prior to the YWCA's acquisition of the building, it was used as a nursing home. I can't tell you definitively how long that occurred. We can't tell you definitively what types of modifications occurred to the site during the time that it was owned by that nursing home operator prior to the YWCA. But again, there have been changes to the exterior of the building, including the ramp that the YWCA has added, the modification to the north facade of that building as a result of its addition to the existing 1970s modern administration and pool building, as well as window type replacement modifications. And if you'd like further detail on that, we have both the project architect as well as the project manager here who can address those items in further detail.
Do you have a record of building permits as to the modifications over generally those are typically available, but whether the History Center or otherwise?
The History Center gave us a log of, Hi, I'm Jack Schroeder with Lindenbaum Baker Architects. We did do a full check with the History Center, and I don't have that information with me today, I apologize. But it went down through the ownership through the years, and again, didn't really log any significant owners, designers, events that had happened here. But we could dig that up.
Were there any depictions of the original house that was built?
We didn't get any photos, drawings, nothing like that from that search.
So again, Mr. Chairman, based on the YWCA development team's efforts to uncover whatever types of information may be available to give further insight into the background of the building, and the fact that there was no such insight provided through that process, we have turned primarily to, and based on discussions with staff, the inventory that was provided back when the Ridge Historic District was nominated for that purpose. Which, again, I don't want to harp on the same point, but I think it's quite relevant that the city itself determined that there had been a number of modifications in the building. And that's, I say that because that's obviously an unbiased perspective. That's not this property owner, making allegations for its own interest, but rather a specific reference to a finding made by the city in the past. With respect to the second of the 6 standards regarding demolition, whether the property, structure, or object relates to the distinctive, historic, cultural, architectural, or archaeological character of the district as a whole. So, again, as I've said a number of times, the existing administration and pool building, which, if you'll bear with me a second, I'm going to go back to the site plan to help with context. I think this will work actually, and maybe it'll work well because it also depicts the footprint of the existing domestic violence center, as well as another proposed formerly single-family residential structure located on the northern portion of the site. So this is the proposed site plan, which is again reflective of the proposed demolition within the Ridge Historic District, as well as the proposed construction within the Ridge Historic District. So I'm referring specifically to the modifications that are depicted as being left of the vertical orange line, generally vertical orange line. So the sort of bold black line that you see, bold dashed black line that you see, is the footprint of the existing domestic violence shelter, the former single-family residential structure, previously operated as a nursing home and operated as a domestic violence center for the past 60 years. 50 years. The demolition of that structure is proposed as a result of the proposed construction of this new addition and the reconfiguration of the parking lot. As you can see, necessarily, as a result of the way in which the existing pool and administration building was constructed in 1970, there were significant modifications that had to have been made necessarily to the northern facade of that structure. There, perhaps Jack can speak to that better than I can in an architectural sense, but there naturally would have had to have been significant modifications to that building. There's no two ways around it. So that's quite relevant because when you look at the footprint of the existing YWCA Center building, which is the generally light gray footprint that you see, or quite light gray polygon that you see sort of toward the center of the property, you can see that that is a building which has existed for 50 years and clearly dominates the site. And as a result of its presence on the site for 50 years, it obviously has greatly impacted the character of the neighborhood. So when you look at this standard relative to the structure and its relation to the district or the architectural character of the district, for a period of 50 years, this site and the 1970 existing administration and pool building, which has been there for 50 years, has been greatly impacting the neighborhood. It has set the tone for what the neighborhood sense of place is relative to this site in relation to the surrounding neighborhood. Again, I can't really overstate this enough. If you look at the footprint of the existing polygon, the light gray polygon, which again has been there for 50 years, in relation to the footprint of the existing domestic violence shelter to the left or to the south, you can see that it's significantly larger and obviously has a significantly greater impact on both the site and the neighborhood as a result. Unless you have any questions with relative to that standard, I'm going to move to the third. Whether demolition of the property, structure, or object would be contrary to the purpose and intent of this chapter and to the objectives of the historic preservation, of historic preservation for the applicable district. So the zoning ordinance speaks specifically to continued utilization or rehabilitation of property. Again, the YWCA has been on the site for 50 years. It's proposing to rehabilitate, renovate the site so that it can continue to be on the site for another 50 or more years. So the concern that this standard drives at is the exact opposite of what the YWCA is seeking to do. It is only because the existing domestic violence shelter building is obsolete and impractical to be improved and renovated in a cost-effective and feasible manner that the YWCA has come to the conclusion that the most appropriate course of action for that building would be for it to be demolished. It's not as if the YWCA has taken that decision lightly. Again, it went through extreme efforts over a period of the past 50 years to continue to utilize the property, use that building, the existing domestic violence shelter building, for a use for which it was never contemplated. The YWCA has taken measures necessary to be able to retrofit that building to the greatest of its ability for the purposes of continuing to serve the Evanston community. That's no longer an option for reasons that we can discuss later, and again, for which both the project manager and project architect are here to describe in greater detail. With that, I'll move to condition 4. Whether the property, structure, or object is of such old, unusual, or distinctive design, texture, and/or material that it could not be reproduced without great difficulty and/or expense. This, I believe, is a pretty subjective standard because it's a little difficult to describe what exactly is unusual or distinctive to one person and what constitutes difficult to another person in the way of reproduction. But relative to building materials, and I think this goes to the statement you made earlier, Mr. Chairman, the building is a frame wood and stucco building. There are not significant architectural features, no significant architectural building materials that are foreign or unusual to Evanston. It would not be difficult to build another structure with wood frame, wood exterior siding, stucco, Tudor style, light doors, etc., similar to what exists for this existing building. So I'll move on to 5. Whether the property, structure, or object is of such physical condition that it represents a danger and imminent hazard condition to persons or property, and that retention, remediation, or repair are not physically possible or require great difficulty and/or expense. So here again, I mentioned earlier that this is a building that cannot be economically renovated or rehabilitated to an alternative use or use in a manner in which it makes sense for the YWCA to continue to operate the building for its mission for the benefit of the community. Importantly, from a building code perspective, it lacks fire-resistant materials, doesn't employ energy-conserving techniques, and those things have the ability, obviously, to both impact or compromise the safety of the persons that reside within it, as well as the environment. Relative to condition 6, for, again, the demolition standards, this is a condition that pertains to whether there are plans for a period of up to 5 years not to replace the building. Well, that is clearly not the intention here. The YWCA is proposing this demolition specifically because it has plans to take immediate action, in fact, as soon as the entitlement process concludes, which is hopefully this fall, for it to break ground and commence the redevelopment activities that are driving this proposed demolition. So you want me to move on to the construction standards?
Sure.
Okay, so there are,
But again, you don't have to you don't have to satisfy every construction standard, and not even, I mean, generally, the construction standards that would be interested in would be these ones relating to compatibility to nearby structures.
Sure, sure. So I'm gonna go back then to the rendering that I had before. And I guess I would also then refer you to the 4-page group exhibit that I circulated earlier, because that obviously provides context for the neighborhood and responds directly to compatibility. Yeah, I think this is the best one. So I'm just gonna respond to what you said as opposed to trying to go through these standards point by point, but I'm happy to discuss them to whatever extent you'd like. So relative to construction, again, all that is proposed within the Ridge Historic District is what you see here as essentially a light gray building. It's this new lobby entrance, 2-story curtain wall system style building with a proposed pedestrian way that would afford access between the parking area you can sort of see to the south and the new domestic violence center and community center building that would be on the north side of the site, sort of in the background. What you can't really appreciate from here because of the vantage point, the higher level elevation vantage point from which this elevation is shown, is that the gross majority of that proposed new lobby, curtain wall, pedestrian way building, whatever you want to characterize it as, will actually not at all be visible from the public way, which is obviously quite relevant to the Preservation Commission's purview, given that it all pertains to visibility from the public way. What will be visible, obviously, is, I'm sorry, let me stop and explain that a little further. The reason that the majority of that building will not be visible is because its height will not exceed the ridge of the existing pool and administration building you can see in the foreground. And what I mean by that is the building that is closest in this rendering has a pitched roof with a ridge height that will be at or slightly in excess of the overall height of this 2-story proposed addition, with the exception of the portion of that 2-story addition that juts to the south, and then of course has a sloped roof that pitches upward from a north-south perspective. Again, I think you have to reflect back on the remarks I made earlier about the predominance of the existing 1970s pool administration building on this site for the past 50 years, and its footprint for this site and its impact on the neighborhood as a result. This proposed addition is not intended to have a historic type character or an architecturally historic appearance. It's proposed to be constructed in a manner that is compatible with the existing established character of the primary building on the YWCA campus, which again is the building built in 1970 that has that expansive polygon footprint that I referenced earlier. As you can also see, and hopefully agree, the proposed addition, which again is only the curtain wall portion that is south of the existing south facade of the building in the foreground, is not offensive, in terms of its overall design relative to architectural character of a historic nature. It's something that is consistent with the architectural style of the existing building improvements on the YWCA campus today, but not something that is designed in a manner that is entirely out of character for the neighborhood. In fact, if you look at that exhibit that I circulated earlier and look specifically at that 4th sheet, so I would respectfully direct you to the proposed condition row, so bottom of the page, and look specifically at photos 3 and 9. So 3 depicts the proposed entryway that you can see on the rendering on the overhead screen. 9 depicts the building at, I want to say, 1800 Ridge, if I recall correctly. That, I think we could all very comfortably agree, has a much more dominant appearance, given its overall height and mass, than something minimal like the proposed construction that's depicted in photograph 3 or rendering 3. And obviously, given the dominance of what is depicted in 9, which is to the north of this site, dominance with respect to both size and height or mass, you know, I think you can very comfortably, or hope that you can very comfortably conclude that the impact of this proposed new construction on the YWCA campus will be de minimis by comparison to the established character of the neighborhood, given the presence of the building that's shown in photograph 9. Mr. Chairman, to your point, you know, a lot of the specific standards that are a part of the standard review for construction pertain specifically to the types of design elements for the proposed construction. Do you want me to get into those? Do you want the project architect to get
I
into
mean,
them?
if you're really kind of hit the big points you'd like to hit, I think maybe it would be better letting commission members ask questions and then letting members of the public speak. And
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to sit down if you prefer. I just,
well, why don't you remain at the podium for a minute and see if, before the public speaks, if commission members have questions they'd like to ask. Ask Calvin. Do you want to?
I have a, well, should we be talking about the standards for construction or the standards for demolition?
Well-
They're really two separate issues.
Yeah, they are. I mean, do you want, I mean, if we have questions from the applicant that are, you know, factual issues or questions about the project, maybe we should ask them. If not, why don't we let members of the public speaking and come back to discussion?
That would be better.
Okay, then why don't you have a seat? Thank you. Sure. Are there members of the public who signed up who would like to speak? Did you want to speak? Okay, would you like to come up and speak?
Excuse me, I'm Mary McWilliams. I'm one of the neighbors who got one of these postcards and got to look at the project. First of all, let me say, I have lived in that neighborhood for nearly 50 years. And I've been aware of the YWCA being there and have been, I support the organization and what it's doing. I support its work. I support the fact that it wants to expand. I just have serious reservations about the project. And I am concerned that demolishing a historic house to put up that thing up there is a travesty. I'm sorry. I just can't support that building. There were some questions about boundaries and about why that house was included in the district. I did not help write the district. I was an associate commissioner at the time it was written, but I was in close contact with the authors, Ann Earl and Barbara Bookbinder Green. The boundaries were made tight and narrow at that end because the character of the city changed, of the streetscapes changed on the east side of the street to apartment houses and, pardon me, I'm sorry, I need some more, to other buildings. There used to be a house, a historic house on the southwest corner of Church and Ridge. It burned after the district. So it was replaced by the townhouses, the row townhouses, which came before the commission. And the important thing about those buildings is that they the commission wanted them to make a transition from the multifamily buildings on the east side of the street to the single-family houses on the west side. This building helps to make that transition. The district then goes north up Asbury and to Emerson, and because this is that the character changed at that point. There's the intersection of Green Bay and Ridge and the train tracks that helped to determine the boundary as well. So I just feel strongly that it could be a better design. Thank you.
Are there other, excuse me, I need water, Joe. Are there other members of the public that would like to speak? Or
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Rack, and I am a neighbor who lives in very close proximity, actually 1719 Asbury, right behind the Y. And when we moved in, I'm also speaking as a professional. I'm an architect. And when we moved in, it's kind of like going to move in Wrigleyville. We knew the building was there. We knew what we were with, and we've had a very peaceful and wonderful coexistence. And we also believe very, very strongly in the mission of the YWCA, and we've been, as well as the Flying Fish, and have been we've been swimming there for many years. So we really believe in the building. I do think, though, that architecture has a responsibility. It's not only to itself and whether it's in a historic district or not, but it's to its neighbors, which happen to be in a historic district. And we've been working with the Y and through the course of the last year looking at plans. But what we see today, we don't see any impact in terms of what we've seen architecturally of what the impact to the historic district is and to the neighbors in terms of impact of light at night, impact of noise, impact of sound, their mechanical systems, things that I think are really important when you're a neighbor and when you're a neighbor to a historic district. So what I would ask if we could have as part of it, we are not at this point privy to the impact to the neighborhood, which is probably part of our homes and what it would mean. Certainly along Ridge Avenue, there is a strong break in the neighborhood, and it does change, and the scale is different. But then when you go to the historic district, which is just on the other side, I think there's considerations that need to be made, and we have not, as a community, seen what that looks like. And so I would say that I, as a neighbor and somebody who has a vested interest in the community, we've lived there for over 36 years, I think. Actually, my mother-in-law was on the board that approved the YWCA building, so we have a history here. And we just want to make sure that we're compatible with the neighbors because of the responsibility that architecture has to not only work within the context of what it is, but to improve the context of what's next to it in itself. So that's my thought. Thank you.
could you sign?
I think, okay. My husband's a little
Are there other members of the public who would like to speak? Go ahead. We'll just wait a minute. Have you signed in? Yeah. Okay. Just a sec. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate the presentation.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, YMCA. Tom Rowland, 1735 Asbury Avenue. In terms of the site plan, we're just behind 1800 Ridge. So within viewing distance of the house we're talking about demolishing, as well as neighbor to the YWCA. So again, I think it goes without saying, and I think my neighbor, what was just said was well spoken, well said. I as well am a licensed architect with a firm in the city of Chicago, 7-year resident of Evanston. originally bought on the south side in the Ridgeville area, 3 years ago bought in this district. We just sit outside of the historic district, our house, but with that proximity to our neighbors and the style of the house we live in, it fits in the context of the historic district. And I think, point taken, the development along Ridge is a ever-changing district on Ridge with the residences that are going up, with some of the demolitions happening with what's proposed here today. I do think, though, there is some context that has to be analyzed and discussed, not only by the applicant, but by this group here in front of me. I would think, one, as previously stated, acoustics is a big concern. Today, in my mind, there's an acoustic issue from the property bleeding onto the neighborhood property to the west. That's been brought up in the first application by the YWCA that was sort of dismissed by this committee in terms of the purchase and the change of use of the houses to offices. And again, just as an example, I went out with a decibel meter yesterday morning at 5 a.m. when there's no traffic and things like that. And if you look at the application acoustically, it exceeds the allowable noise permittance. Looking at the current proposed site design, which I just saw tonight, there's an existing mechanical system staying where it's flanked by a large building. There's a proposed 45-foot tall residential tower creating a sort of L shape or U shape that will project all the noise and acoustics from those mechanical units onto the west side and onto the residences adjacent to that property. So I think that's a big concern I would have, and my neighbors directly adjacent to the YMCA should have. So acoustics is definitely a big one. I would also look at the site plan tonight and say loading, where the existing residence is and the garage that abuts directly to my neighbor to the south. That garage gets demoed, and what is proposed today is the loading and trash refuse area, which again puts the quantity of dumpsters that are going to be there at the property line for pickup. So again, imagine living next to that, having that happening or directly adjacent to your backyard. So I would look at that whole property line and separation from that district and those houses along the adjacent property. How do we create a landscape buffer, acoustic buffer, privacy buffer? Because today we have noise bleed and light bleed from wall packs and things like that into those properties. And I think that would be something that should be considered and addressed.
I mean, just as a note, I mean, our purview is simply historic preservation, and the building to the north is not even, to be built to the north isn't even in our district. I mean, there will be other city hearings for the planned development that at least some of those issues would be more appropriate for it, but I think all the issues you mentioned are well outside of any decision that we would make tonight.
Okay. Well, then I'll conclude, and we'll address that at a later time, but I think I would conclude that if you look at the context of the neighborhood, what was there and what is being proposed is not in the same vein of the historic district that exists there today in terms of proximity. Thank you.
Other members of the general public that would like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For those of you that have not had an opportunity to meet, my name is Peter Braithwaite. I'm Alderman of the 2nd Ward. I'm not sure if you all are 2nd Ward residents, so my apologies to have my back to you. So within the 10 years of City Council, I don't think I've ever had an opportunity to speak in front of this committee. I've attended meetings, I've seen some of the referrals that you've made to City Council, and to be honest, I couldn't think of a better time to be here to speak on behalf of the YWCA, and I want to just take a brief moment to acknowledge Karen Singer, the wonderful work that she has done in the community over the many years, taking care of our most vulnerable residents. If the statistics that she has taught me over the years are true, then at least one, maybe two of you have been victims of domestic violence, or you know someone who has been a victim of domestic violence. And the reason that I bring that up is for two reasons, because I believe that It's the operation and the mission of the organization that deserves preserving versus the building, to answer your question directly, Mr. Chairman. I've had an opportunity to tour the whole facility and specifically the building that hosts the young women and children who are often impacted by the violence, and walking through there. And I'm just curious if any of you have had an opportunity to walk through. Yes, no, looking for, no, yes, okay. I find it to be a very dark place, not very accessible if someone has special needs. The building itself has cage windows for the protection of those that are in there. And when I think about the families who, for whatever life circumstances, have to live in that shelter for whatever life reasons are, I don't think there's a damn thing that I would want to preserve in there, to be honest. I serve on the governing body, so I understand the difficult decision that you have in front of you. I don't expect you to step out of the standards of the committee, but I do understand that there are some causes and reasons to suspend the rules. And I think if there was ever a time in the history of the Presidential Committee to really take a bold stand, that tonight may be that opportunity. And whether you choose to or not, I'm confident that it will come to City Council. We'll maybe have to discuss on a broader stage, but I do ask you to either vote to demolish it, and again, what I'm asking you to preserve is the mission of the YWCA and the assistance they provide to our women and our children who find themselves in the most vulnerable situations. So thank you very much, and again, I appreciate your time and your commitment and service to our community.
Okay, well, we can have any kind of discussion you want, and if we have questions for the architect, we can call up whatever anybody would like to do. But please don't hold back. If you, we'll wrap up if everybody has questions. So.
It's always what you mean.
We're going to adjourn the meeting if no one's
Yeah,
going
we'll
to
adjourn. I was curious, I had a couple of general questions for the YW. There were all these discussions about changes and revisions to that existing home. And some of them there's no history on. But then there was conversation about porch, ramp, etc. How many of those were undertaken by the YWCA during your reign?
The ramp? The ramp was added at the city's request because the building was, what we used to do is carry people in wheelchairs up the stairs. So that was added, and while there was a certain structural element to a porch, we did renovate that and screen it in for the residents.
I'm curious, and I realize Carlos is probably the only one who might have known. We won't hold Scott to this, but I'm curious how many of these, because I don't know of any during my time that came before the commission, which normally they would have, because that home was in the district. So these were external changes that would have been, at least from what I see, viewable from the public way. And whether they went through the commission or they were under a previous ordinance. So there is a history of some of these changes having been made.
Yeah, I know we worked with the building department on the ramp and had a permit for that, so I can't say why it didn't come before the commission.
Same with the porch.
Yeah, the porch was just, I think there were just some screens put in.
Right.
Might know better than that.
Screens might not, but I'm curious about the ramp and some of those changes.
Yeah, I do know we had a permit for that because they were making it much larger than we had intended.
The only record we have might be Mary.
Yeah, you know, I was gonna ask Mary.
I'm sorry, I was gonna
Mary,
bring
can
it
I,
up.
can I ask you questions? So, I mean, before we vote to demolish, I would like to know what house we're voting to demolish, like when it was built and, you know, what additions were made. Do you think it's feasible to find those records?
It was built before building permits were established in 1892, 1894, I'm sorry. So the work would have been done, the only way to find the information would have been through the newspapers. I should have brought Ann tonight, she's not been well, so I didn't think to bring her tonight, because she was one of the co-authors and knows that material very well. It was a house that, it's not the strongest house in the district. I mean, there's no question about that. It was built, it seems to have been built in the 1880s. As I said, it was included, I can tell you this, it was included because it strengthened the district and helped to tie into the buildings that they were going to continue, take in on Asbury. The boundaries were very, very tightly drawn and excluded everything that was inappropriate, that did not meet the standards for this particular district. The building, as I said, is not a strong building. And I can't tell you why the ramp didn't come before you, because it should have. Except it may have been a life safety issue, and it may have gone through Carlos. But it was a district that was created in 1980, so it would have been, timing was right. No, is there anything else?
Would the History Center have files on the house that?
The building file, yes, there is a house, every house has a set of records. All of the permits that were here in the city until about 1980 are over there. Every record that is available on those houses, but unfortunately with houses that were built before 1894, the information is very sparse, and then you have to turn to the newspapers. Ann and Barbara did read the newspapers on those buildings, so there would be information. As I said, it was not, it was a nice house, a nice building, and it was compatible with the district. As was established then, and as I said, there was another house on the corner, so they didn't leap over a new building to get to this one to include it. There was a very good logical reason for including it.
So there was another house to the south of this house when you
Yes.
got to church? I'm not talking about the townhouses on the other side.
Well, that's, no, there was no, not on the north side of church, no, just, that was the house on that lot, on that corner lot, the northwest corner of Church and Ridge was that house only. And then on the south side, there was another house, there was a historic house, so that there was continuity to create the district, and justification to go across the street at that point.
So I'm looking at the line, like how the district is drawn here.
Yeah.
And there is a very definite, the district follows Asbury, and then it comes out where that house that burnt down used to be.
Right.
Goes across the street to include the YW, and then goes back over to Asbury and keeps going. So we have commercial
Yeah.
that's not in the district for a block or a block and a half south, and then
Yeah, because the institutional buildings were in non-contributing, would have been non-contributing, and because they were on an edge, they would not have been included. The boundaries of this district go in and out, throughout the whole district. So this is, that boundary is consistent with the boundaries that were drawn for that district.
It looks as if they were trying to encompass both sides of the church when you look at that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because they wanted to go north on Asbury, and they needed strong buildings, because the three houses on Asbury south of Church are not that strong. So in order, and these buildings justify doing that.
So-
Comment, or-
I'm sorry.
I just want to let you guys know we did work with the History Center, and I'm kind of pulling it up here with Grace, and she did an intern working on it, and then kind of did a double dive into it.
I'm
Maybe
sure
we'll
she
let
did it.
those questions and then
Okay,
maybe
sure.
you could figure out what,
Yep.
and then come address it, because I think it's an important point to address what
Alright.
resources it is. Thanks. Other discussion points or other types of questions from anybody? No.
You want me to go?
No.
So I think this is actually a very close issue to myself because I live just north on Ridge. So I walk by this property thousands of times a year. And I'm in the second ward, so I'm very familiar with the work you do, and I appreciate everything you do. You're very important to the area. So, but it is something where it's your backyard and you're familiar with the neighborhood. So I do understand Mary's comments. I also understand the gentleman's comments about Ridge being an ever-changing, landscape there. We have a lot of activity that's going on there. All that outside of the historic district for the most part. So not something I'm supposed to obviously comment about. Again, the new construction and the addition that you're proposing, that addition specifically is such a small percentage of this district that is nothing that concerns me. I think this really comes down to, as I was listening, I came in here with a few more concerns, but as I was listening through, and I went through the standards several times just, as we were all sitting here, I think the big thing that was critical to whether this approved for demo or not approved was the standard one, which is, does this have the significance? And I think the nomination form talks about it, as Mark's been trying to, I think, hone in a little bit of what the significance of this home is and what its history was. It'd be a horrible thing to lose a historic home. My only concern is that as we're sitting here, it really hasn't revealed a lot of information on what the significance truly was. And I don't know if it carries enough weight for us to not allow a demolition of this home. So as a resident, that makes me sad in a certain way, just because this is something that is part of the neighborhood, it is part of the fabric of the district. I'm grappling with the issue that I don't know. I know in this nomination form it called it an anchor to the corner, and it had that reference. I'm just not sure that I feel that it meets that standard one wholly to really carry the weight of the demolition. So I'd actually be curious if the other commissioners have any comments on that. Because as far as the other standards, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I don't think those are the critical standards that apply to this. Some of them actually don't apply. I think 1 is the real heart of the matter. So if you guys have any comments, I think I'd be open to hearing those.
I tend to agree. I think standards 1 and 2 are really the critical ones, where is this house individually distinctive, and is it an important part of the character of the district overall? I think Mary's explanation helps me understand why the boundary is doing what it does, because obviously looking at it now, there are those modern townhouses that have nothing to do with the district, but originally it would have been 2 historic houses on Church there, kind of as bookends to mark the limit of the district, and that's why they probably wanted to encompass this house. But I do think that it's an indication that the context of the district has changed fairly significantly since it was established and since the boundary was drawn. And you look at Ridge Avenue today, and it has a very eclectic character, and there's a lot of different things going on. And this house is not really creating a strong character as you look at the street front on Ridge. It's not. It's dominated by all the other types of structures in that area. But the nomination's a little confusing because they're talking about all these things with Lincoln in the 1860s, which clearly don't have anything to do with this house. It was a preceding structure that's long gone. But I would want to know a little more about what we know about this specific house beyond, in reading the National Register nomination, it seems like that is a quote they found in the newspaper about the mid-1880s construction of this house, but beyond that, we don't really seem to know anything. And that's really what I'm curious about still.
Do other commissioners to speak before it's too late? We can move on discussion.
You trying to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that I am also curious about the construction of the house and more of the detailing. I'm torn between Mary's argument, which I tend to agree with. I think it does hold the corner. I drove around that block several times today, and it's an important sight line. And I can see the argument, I can agree with the argument for holding the two sections of the Asbury and Ridge Historic Districts together. I also agree with the argument that it is a commercial corner in a way, and that it would reflect Roycemore and some of the other church institutions along the west side of Ridge. And so I personally think we need a little bit more information.
I think, Mark, I'm sorry. I think one of the difficulties is that there was an intention as to what encompassed both sides of the church when the district was created. And the irony is, granted, it was a result of a fire, not somebody coming before the commission to say, let's tear down the building on the south side of the church. You know, that when if this is also demolished, you're almost at the point of saying, I guess let's redraw the boundaries of the district because there's nothing left of the district. And is that where we're heading? Whether intentionally or not. Because there's no longer, well, that little piece no longer exists. So that at that point, you might as well move the district back, you know, to the east side of Asbury and drop off, you know, both of them, both lots, if I'm going to call it that. So that on the one hand, we're discussing vestiges of a district and whether everybody will only remember it as being the district, because anybody coming through will now say, what district is involved here? It's no longer there. And that's really a problem in the long run. Or do we say these districts are really somewhat tenuous, and at some point people do have to go around and redraw these districts, which has maybe never been addressed at all?
There are two historic houses just south of the townhouses that are part of the district as well. And then there's so yes, and I agree with I agree with your point.
Mr. Schroeder, did you have any luck finding any other information that?
Yeah, I looked back, sorry. I looked back at Grace's email and attachments, and it's basically what Steve included in the packet. I mean, it's the nomination form, and then she broke out with a little more knowledge of who Robert Hill was, built the building, a Civil War veteran, dry goods merchant, banker from Milwaukee. So I could share the email, I don't know how at this point, but I mean, I can come up and show you, but it really just kind of, it didn't talk a lot about conditions, style, it was ownership, who these people were, a former president of Northwestern, but that was the old house that was split up and moved to two different sites. So I'm, like I said, I'm happy to share.
I mean, I think we
But
all
the
reviewed
attachments are in your packet.
We all did review what's in the
Yeah.
packet. I mean, I think it's just, I don't recall actually any application coming before us to do something, I mean, not just demolition, but major alterations that had such a complete lack of information about the house.
The history,
Yeah.
Do you have like a chronology of ownership? Like, so it was, this Robert Hill was the original owner, and then kind of.
Robert Hill was the original, of the 1880, the house that's there now. Let's see, William Otis, a draftsman in the office of William Jenney. So it's more about his work, William Otis's work, and then James and Joseph Silsby, who were actually architects but didn't design the home, lived in the home, owned the home after that. And that's where her research cut off, and maybe that's the nursing home and on. So,
Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, just one minor piece of information about the alterations there. The Preservation Commission did approve the ramp November 16, 2010 at their meeting by a 9-0 vote.
None of us were here. Our terms aren't that long.
Go ahead.
Please.
I was just gonna say that, the one comment I've been thinking, like kind of from the beginning, when you were looking at the blurb about the house, but I'm also trying to keep the context of the district in mind. And the district is what it is because of architectural styles that contribute, that vary from the 1860s through the 1920s. So on the one hand, that home that was built in the 1880s and its architecture, as you guys know from looking at it every day, is very distinctive of Evanston. But on the other hand, I'm wondering, because of losing that house, that other anchor on the corner, and because of how the district runs, and is it, the district, I think, it's not necessarily an outstanding, it's a very good example, but it doesn't have any outstanding features, and the district stands strong in more kind of, the line makes more sense to me now with the loss of that other house and things, without this strange little bump that's on Ridge, and because of the long history of the other buildings that have been there. Yeah, I'm torn too, because, it's not easy to say, okay, well, maybe we could use this house from the 1880s, but I can see both sides of the coin there. I think that there's more continuous examples of what this district is about along Asbury and in the rest of the district.
If you'd like to make any final remarks, and then we'll try to draw this to a conclusion.
Sure, I appreciate that. I actually initially just got up to respond to your comment, Mr. Chairman, regarding the lack of information concerning the structure's architectural history or significance, if any. Respectfully, I guess I would submit that, given that the city's own Ridge District Nomination Form contains minimal information, none of which appears to be material to the architectural character or distinction of the structure, and the fact that we reached out and worked with the Evanston History Center and found the same condition or circumstance, that being a lack of information, seems to demonstrate that the structure doesn't apparently have any historic significance. So while I can appreciate that you're saying, well, what is there? There's got to be something else out there. Nobody seems to know what that other resource would be, if there is such another resource, and we've tackled or gone through the obvious avenues that would seem to be the most prudent path to take to try to answer that kind of question. Since you're suggesting that we should wrap it up, I just want to address a couple of things quickly, if I may. Given the comments that were expressed from both the public and the commission, I guess with respect to the last comment that was made, given the structure's proximity to the corner and the irregular boundary of the district in relation to the structure, I would respectfully submit that, to Commissioner Dudnick's point, there is and should always be an appropriate time to reevaluate district boundaries, whether it's a zoning district boundary or a historic district boundary. Things change, whether it's by casualty, such as a fire for the property to the immediate south, or because of an appropriately issued demolition permit. Obviously, things change, neighborhood character evolves as a result, and respectfully, I think that the circumstances for this property in relation to the property to the south and the overall character of Ridge demonstrate, why it might be appropriate for the commission to look at that. But that's all kind of tangential to the point that, in the end, again, if you appear to have a copy of the district map in front of you, and I'm thankful for that, but if you study that map, what is occurring, like I said, for example, generally north of Grove is along Ridge, or within the Ridge Avenue corridor, is quite different from what is occurring generally south of Grove within the Ridge Avenue corridor. You have this, sort of irregularly located extension of the district that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in today's world. I actually think that I can stop there. Anything else that you guys want to add?
I'm sorry.
I have a question or a comment. We've all been looking at standards for review and demolition, and I'm curious because somewhere in the process of doing that, we're not talking about either, or are we going to separately discuss the standards for construction, since the construction, when we're looking at it, we've been looking at for the last 45 minutes on the wall there, are all happening, and that portion of it is going to be in the district.
No, I mean, if you
correct?
have, again, the comments might be more, if you're
Well, but by
directed to the
default,
architect, if you
well,
have
we can't.
issues on the new construction.
But I think it's a commission issue, because by default, and I'm not sure there's any way around it, a decision made on the demolition essentially either accepts something going back into the district to replace that house. That little piece that we are looking at is in the district, is going to be the replacement. So when we've been talking about what replaced the building, in the same way that there was discussion of the townhomes on the other side, this will be the replacement on the north side of the church, like it or not.
We have to vote on it.
Yeah, I know,
If you
but
have questions.
can we, yeah, I think we have to
discuss it.
discuss them both simultaneously, and that's, I'm just asking all the other commissioners. Everybody's been talking about the concern about the demolition, as if this building that's going in is outside of the district. Now, granted, most of it is.
No, we
Most
have
of
to
the
vote on
proposal
this.
is not even within our context.
There's no doubt, we have to vote on the new building, and if
Okay.
do you have questions for the architect? or
Yeah, I
do you
guess I
just-
will, because several of the public raised the question of the building, I guess all of them, all three of them.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
In
go ahead, I'm
between
sorry.
your-
Yeah, let
So it's all part of the same vote, though?
We have
Yeah,
to
that's-
vote on three separate things, we have to vote three times. We have to vote on the demolition of the existing home. We have to vote on, just on an advisory basis for whether we object to the planned development ordinance amendment to zoning code, which again I think probably doesn't involve any material preservation issues in this case. So I think that's really not something that I'm much concerned. And then we have to vote on whether this new building the construction of it
But it's two
is
separate
compatible with the district. So I mean, they're obviously not totally separate, but we do have to vote separately on each of those. So if you, would you like to ask the architect questions about the new structure? I mean, would you like to discuss the new structure?
Okay. That was gonna-
Why me?
because that was my-
Come on, there's a couple of architects on this commission, let's do your homework. Well, I think it's been raised, and you might as well address it as to, was there any thought about what the district is about when you did this? I know it was commented by the original speaker that we can't really see this from the street, and all of your exhibits. I can see it from Church, and I can see it from Ridge. So to say that piece either was going to be hidden by the other building is really not the case. Even your photos show it. No, you can see it all.
I think you may have misunderstood what I said, or perhaps I wasn't clear, sorry, Ted. What I think I said, or what I was trying to say is, and this is not the best representation, but obviously it's intended to afford you the greatest visibility, which you won't have from the street, whether you're standing on the sidewalk or driving in a car, is that again, I wish I had a functional pointer, but
The top button there should work for pointer. It's a little tough, it's light green, and sometimes it doesn't show up, it's tough to get the point, but.
You see that,
Yeah. So I think you understand this, but just to be clear, what we're talking about, where did it go? Okay, what we're talking about is this building right here. So this two-story portion of the building and this second floor only portion of the building, which extends along the west side of the existing ridge, no pun intended, of this building along the Ridge Road. So this, basically from here, if you were to be looking, for example, straight west from Ridge at the existing east facade of this building here, this east facade, you would, and Jack can address this probably more eloquently than I can, from about like this point north, you will not see the building, this proposed addition.
This has nothing to do with, I mean, we, under the ordinance, we have, the structure is visible from the public way. We have to approve it. If Elliot, I mean, we have to decide whether it meets the preservation standards. Do you have, I mean, again, everybody's kind of waiting to comment until somebody else
I'm
has.
asking because we have all these standards for
Okay,
construction.
so we do have to approve it. Do you have either comments or questions?
I'm
for the
asking
applicant on
about-
the compliance with
well,
the standards?
I mean, I'm not sure if he addressed it at all when you were doing it. Or did you consider some of these standards?
Yeah, I specifically.
Not you, the architect.
Oh.
So I would say, not directly, not in an impersonation sort of way. At a certain point, we were sort of matching the energy of the organization, realizing that, as Mr. Simon said, the district kind of goes away from this corner once that house is gone. So I think it was giving over to the fact that this is a public building, trying to be wide open, inviting, and those sort of things, I think. And also the context, which I think Steve said a few times, of the building that's there now. We're already dealing with a lot of glazing, along where, I guess it was a preschool space at some point. So in all honesty, and just by saying it, no, it wasn't, we weren't trying to match a hipped roof, a turret, those sort of things. And just trying to be subtle, open, and that's where there might be some discussion on whether it is subtle or not. And then to address other things, which again don't seem to fall under here, we'd love to talk about site lighting, noise. We have been considering these things, and we just need to make sure we share them with you guys. But that's a separate piece.
I guess my concern is, and we don't have any way around it, that all the buildings that are surrounding that addition are outside the district, and yet they butt up to the district. I'm talking about the existing YWCA building. And ironically, in the 50 years that they've been there, they've become the context as much as anything else. So, you're not really addressing that context as much, and it doesn't, we're caught up in standards. It's not really your fault to talk about proportions of openings. We've just gone through that 2 weeks ago, so I hate to revisit that.
And just to speak to the function.
Again.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I think that it's really this difficulty of, this is going to be representative of the district, like it or not, and how do we deal with that? And I'm asking it almost in a rhetorical question, because I'm not seeing that any of those concerns are there. I would have said I'm not seeing any concerns with even the context of the other buildings to some extent. I mean, you were talking about the energy of what's happening in the building. I'm not sure, if you said you were trying to relate it to the new building to the north. So I'm not quite clear how we relate it to the district. I mean, this is going to be a problem for all of us, I'm assuming, other commissioners here as well, as to, are we still concerned that this is what's the vestige of the district or not? And will it matter? short run or long.
I mean, we've dealt with other structures that are not adjacent to historic structures in the district. And we do have the right to consider whether the building is in some way, doesn't meet the standards and is detrimental to the district. Clearly, proposing structures that are, for example, directly adjacent to other historic structures, that's a major concern. I mean, I think you're correctly saying that that concern dissipates. It's hard to find historic preservation issues when it's not proximate to another historic structure. They could have proposed a building here. I mean, we've all seen them. That still would have been very destructive to the district. I mean, certainly in my opinion, the building, they've shown the streetscape. It's compared to other adjacent buildings. It does not stand out in any way, and therefore, I mean, we're not obligated to find that there are historic preservation issues where there aren't.
And I do think maybe that is a move. The scale where we cited it, there were studies along the way where we built a large building on that corner that we put away pretty quickly. And I mean, these have all been iterated numerous times, as well as studies of what could possibly, happen in the old house, and we just continually dead ended.
Well, what's interesting is that for all these views in the exhibit that we got tonight, I don't see any views as in looking east on Asbury, where we also see the building between those other houses that are along Asbury. I guess that's the outside of the street, which I suspect are all these people over there. Meaning that we should be able to see that. You don't have any view looking from the west towards this building, as if this is the only views that we'd ever see, and it's really not.
That's talking about the four-story building or the new entry piece?
I'm assuming that what we're looking here, the four-story building is technically out of the district, so I'm not sure where we go with that at all. I mean, I suspect we don't.
From having walked that sidewalk many times, honestly, your eye goes to the parking lot and the trees.
Right.
You very rarely, you do see the historic home, but this structure will be very neutral to that setting, in my opinion. And I've walked that block many times.
Because we're not seeing it.
You don't notice it when you're coming from Asbury. So if that just gives you any context, so.
You can see that you could only see the structure from houses on
Well,
the
you'd be seeing,
east side.
you'd be seeing, as you came along Asbury, you should be able to see it. And we're always caught up in that. I mean, in full disclosure, we almost bought one of those houses many years ago on the east side of Asbury, and almost bought one on the west side of Asbury, way back when. And I talked out of one and talked out of the other. But so I know the area as well.
I mean, Elliot, the structure is clearly completely visible from Church Street in the historic
Yeah.
district.
Oh, yeah,
So
it is.
that's a criteria we can apply.
And from the,
I mean, again, if you have a concern about the building not meeting the standards, that's an issue to raise. But if not, I mean, we have.
well, I'm just raising it as a question of have we even discussed the standards for construction? We belabor standards for demolition.
I mean, personally, I heard the applicant's argument and the standards for construction. I thought he mercifully briefly addressed and adequately addressed. And again, if you disagree with his, I mean, I was more concerned about the demolition of the existing house personally, was the only reason. I think that's the only reason everybody was quiet on it, was not because we don't vote, but because it wasn't too much of a concern.
Actually, the public seems to raise the standards for construction more than the standards for demolition. You're the public.
But some of those were site concerns, from what I heard.
Right.
We can work on noise, we can work on light, trash orientation, all the things that we've heard.
Do other commissioners have questions about the new structure, just to make that within the district, just to make sure we thoroughly discuss those?
You may have written this and I may be forgetting. What is the material, the kind of light gray and white? What's the material it's made out of?
For now, we're saying it's a metal, like a composite metal panel. But we could explore, we've talked about, you know, a fiber cement board, something with a little more texture than that. But we're looking at durability and all those things that come along with that, a closed system versus a green screen. So yeah, that's where we're at. And the larger building is actually precast concrete panels.
Any more questions for the, Mr. Schroeder? Thank you. So I guess my question is whether commissioners believe that we're lacking material information which we might need to really get into this. I mean, we obviously don't have all information, but no, okay. Any more discussion before we have a motion to vote?
Can I just say one thing? I just want to clarify, or I just want to make a comment to the stance, because obviously I brought up that I was grappling with standard 1 previously, now that we've discussed 1. I think, and this goes to people like you, Mary, it pains me to think about demolishing this house. I do think it is not as strong of a house to anchor that district and to warrant it to remain. I do wish there was a little bit more public interest in saving the house, and in the way that the standard's written, it really needs to be detrimental, as it says, to the public interest and contrary to the welfare, general welfare. I do think the lack of speaking out to save the house and the work that the YWCA does for the community, in my opinion, just to state it, is that I think that actually weighs this, that it's unfortunate and we don't want to see a historic home leave the city of Evanston in this way, but I do think that this is a special case that allows me to feel confident that it does meet that standard 1, and I just wanted to state that for the record.
Can I make a comment about the construction standards, or are we just talking about the regulations?
We're trying to wrap up, so please make any comments.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna go through all of them, but the first one on height, where it's supposed to be visually compatible, visually related. Obviously, the height of the new entranceway is not visually related to what Elliot points out very correctly, is a lower brick structure that's been there for a while, which is sort of like 1970s modern, whatever you want to call it. More industrial, square. Talks about proportion of facades also being visually related. Visually related is used in a lot of the standards, and I have a concern about that.
Any other comments? Would anybody like to make a motion? Jamie? Actually, why don't we, since the standards for demolition require that any plans for new structure be approved as part of it, why don't we combine demolition and new construction, and then we'll do the zoning advisory separately.
Okay, then would it still be the certificate of appropriateness
For
for
demolition
demolition
and for
and
construction,
new
and we
construction?
can combine them.
Okay, I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition and new construction of the building at 11215 Church Street. Should I go into all the detail? Demolition of the existing attached house and a 2-story addition within the Ridge Historic District to the southern end of the building. The advisory is a separate issue, correct?
I think it's just in accordance with the standards for demolition 1 through 6.
1 through 6, and new construction 1 through 15.
Okay. A second?
Second.
Oh, good cat. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All against? Sally and Elliot, and no abstentions. So we have the motion passes 5-2. Thank you.
And how the advisory
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so for the advisory review, would anybody like to make a motion? We didn't really discuss the zoning issue, but I don't know if it's really a preservation issue at all. I think it's a plain unit development for the whole. It's probably one zoning lot. Is it one zoning lot for the whole complex?
It is essentially one zoning lot, and the zoning ordinance does have the Preservation Commission making an advisory recommendation, whether it's wholly or in part within the district.
Can we just say we can check?
Making recommendations, typically be for approval, or approval of conditions, or denial. Options. But the full plan development is within the review, although it makes sense to focus most on the impact of the story.
And maybe we can say that we're satisfied solely for preservation purposes or something, because it seems like it almost exclusively goes beyond preservation. Would anybody like to try to craft a brief motion?
I would, but I'd like to know, because they were combined in the original statement, so it's what portion of it, or whatever we.
It's the sentence that
we're not
begins.
recommending. What are we
It's
recommending?
advisory review. I don't know that we should quote recommend them quote as much as just say that we're.
What are we? I'll be happy to do it as soon as I understand what I'm.
It looks like this is only related to the 4-story, 23-unit, to like the part of the development that is outside of the district.
It's the
And
full
then
plan
change-
development, so inside and outside. I'll pull up the language and zoning ordinance momentarily.
It seems as if it incorporates the parking and everything else. Is it the entire lot, that whole thing all the way down to Church Street?
Yeah, it includes demolition and construction of the new addition within the district.
And
as well.
setbacks and loading zones and so on, I think.
So the plan development is being referred to the Preservation Commission first for its review and recommendation.
Ironically, Mark, more of the recommendation is in this district.
Well, we could, the motion could be solely with respect to the portion of the project within
I
the
know.
historic district.
We
issue
I'm not trying to
advisory
be light of
approval.
it, but I realize that it essentially incorporates all of that new of the parking lots of Church Street. So-
Well, if we don't want to go on record of approving the new four-story addition.
Well, no, I don't, it's not, it's really not. You keep thinking it's just a 4-story.
Would you like to make a motion as
I'm
fast
not
as you
sure,
can?
I'm not sure what we're advising.
I think we can make a motion that we would recommend that recommend that the further consideration of the project proceed and that there is no historic preservation impact to the project as proposed.
And that's, I think that's just saying in accordance.
In accordance with
Plan development ordinance.
in accordance with the ordinance, section of the ordinance 6-15-11-4, relationship to plan development.
A second?
Second.
Elliot second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Unanimous.
And thank you.
Thank you. All right. Did you have, did anybody give Scott comments on the July 9th minutes?
I actually have some changes, I don't have them with me. Scott knows I'm rushing to get some of his documents. And I will forward them to Howard Charles. Have you gone through a couple of these?
Are they minor changes that we can approve?
Yeah, I
the
think
minutes?
there were some changes, I think most of the, there were mostly typos, I think I found myself having more problems with the language of our discussion about the tree ordinance and all those other things, you know, those two, the collectors and solar stuff and turbines, that was the earlier stuff. And that may not be the case for other people. Then it seems to be saying it's something else.
I felt that it covered the general.
Yeah, I mean,
They're hard to write.
I think we're all very nervous now about making sure that everything's
We have the video.
I mean, if you want,
nobody watching.
it normally wouldn't be approved at the August meeting. Would you rather give comments and we could
No,
defer to
I
the
can
August
send it
meeting?
out, I just didn't have time.
Okay, so why don't we defer to the August meeting? Okay, any other business? No.
I have something that came up in the context of that, I'm sorry.
Of course you would have something.
No, because when we discussed at the last meeting, that issue of, you know, what's in the matrix and what's not, one of the things that I realized in conversation with Carlos this week is the issue of things like ramps and chairlifts and handicap stuff, and actually kind of inadvertently showed up today. And it's not there, and a lot of those things, when you're doing one on historic buildings, you know, how do we do it and who approves it? And whether that's a staff thing or a commission thing, because Carlos wasn't sure. You know, when, you know, if you were just putting a chairlift, to make it simplistic, somewhere and it still can be seen from the public way, is that something you could just approve as a staff number or not? So it's, well, we don't even have a category for that, that's why I raised it.
Good point.
I wonder though whether it should be different than any other construction where there's minor and major and.
We have that list of, what were there, 56 items?
Yeah.
Were into the last meeting?
Half of which are checked multiple boxes.
Yeah, and that's, well, I think what came up last week, and I think with Julie, is just which one, you know, should they all be multiple boxes? But I asked him specifically because the project came up, and it was a question of if it were a lift in one corner, would it have been, does he approve it, or would it still come before the commission?
Can we maybe wait until Carlos is back to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, but I think
I'd like
it's
to
a-
hear his feedback.
It's an ordinance issue. He didn't have an answer for me. I'm gonna kick it to the commission.
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yes, second.
Second.
All in favor, we're adjourned. Thank you.